Welcome to the Health Tech Invest podcast powered by Nutera Ventures, your guide to healthcare investing. Join us as we explore interviews with pioneering entrepreneurs, investors, and innovative leaders, helping you spark innovation in the world of venture capital investing. Awesome. Rich Yang, thank you so much for joining me on Health Tech Invest. Awesome to have you, man. Awesome to have you. So I'd love for you to kind of kick us off here with giving the listeners a little bit of background about yourself and your current role, and a little bit about your journey, actually.
Sure. First, thanks for having me. I've been an operator for over 27 years in the diabetes space, specifically in biosensing. So I was one of the early product managers for the very first CGM that was approved by the FDA long time ago. I'm dating myself. And the category wasn't very successful in the early days. Nobody really understood the value of a continuous sensor. The technology was very early. There was no connectivity. It wasn't wireless. It was a little bit painful to put on. So it was a hard tech to develop, and it was an even harder tech to sell at the time without reimbursement. But I believed in the impact of having real-time biofeedback to people that need it. And diabetes is probably the first material evidence of personalized medicine, right? Where you have very effective drugs, really advanced devices to deliver the drugs continuously, and then biosensing applications, and then, loop control behind it. So, and to see that vision through, I spent the next decade after my time at Medtronic with the great people at Dexcom. And we had a great journey there, bringing that technology to a leading, impactful CGM, and went off into investing for a couple of years. And then Biolinq was our first non-revenue generating investment. We invested in Series A. I met the co-founders, Jared and Jared Tagney and Josh Miller in 2016. They asked me to advise, and I've seen every embodiment of every CGM you can imagine is out there.
Yeah.
And when it came to investing, I vetoed the investment in the company in the first few rounds with our partners, largely because I didn't believe that something so small, a semiconductor biosensor, could actually measure a biomarker. And I told the founders, hey, show me some human evidence. I want to see the stability of the raw signals, even if it's not so accurate. And when they were able to produce that, we invested. And about 4.5 years ago, the board had asked me to come and join. I spent a lot of time with Jared, being one of the co-founders and president and CTO. And I said no.
Wow.
No,
okay.
I was investing, right?
Yeah.
Biolinq was a portfolio company, and I've built and I've been part of great companies that had built biosensors before, and I, didn't want to do another CGM. And so Jared brought me in-house and said, hey, let me show you behind the scenes, the core deeper dive, above and beyond what an investor would see. And then I was sold, and I called my wife and I said, honey, you're not going to see me very often. This is not just ortho sensing.
Yeah. I've left you for another thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we really want to do, Tom, is in order to really power the future of medicine, we want high resolution, high fidelity information on the human condition from home. If we can do that through biosensing in a way such that you're not needing to draw blood, something that's very simple that you can wear, but yet still be powered by electrochemistry that has the handshake with the biomolecule they are attempting to measure continuously, well, hey, let's do it. So I couldn't say no.
Very interesting. So you kind of got in. You didn't join the company at the very beginning. You came in somewhere in the middle of the journey. After you sort of joined, did you ever have any touch and go moments? I mean, you took on this new role. I'm sure there were things about the company you didn't know about that came as a surprise to you.
Yeah.
Are there any things you can share that, like, hey, holy cow, what did I do? Why did I leave my wife for this biosensor?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality sets in pretty quickly because nothing is really as far along as you think it is, right?
Sure.
It doesn't matter what you invest in. It's just, it's just the nature.
That's life. That's a startup life. Yeah.
And anything that and especially if you're working on a technology that is considered a moonshot, right? Very high risk, very high reward, no precedence. When there's no precedence to something like this, a semiconductor biosensor, there's no precedence. There's It's not like there's a formula. There are no requirements. Like, how would you sit down and go about establishing requirements for building this thing when there's no precedence? It's never been done before. So as far along as I envisioned they would be, so we really had to scramble and be all hands on deck to get to the earliest possible prototype as quickly as possible with the cash we had available, because then we can test, things work well on the benchtop often, but it doesn't mean it translates into similar performance in the body, on the body. So that's where a lot of technologies that perform really, really well on the bench, but in the body, they can't overcome all the variability, right? So, for example, it took well over a decade for the CGM sensors to get to a factory calibration where you don't have to finger stick and calibrate against a finger stick. Well, nobody's ever done a semiconductor biosensor approach, but since the first prototype that we created, we got to a factory calibrated version of our product in 2.5 years, right? So
very cool.
That curve, that technology curve is steep, but when you have the right committed core team, you could really do the impossible. But it was scary because when you walk in and nothing is working and you're not as far along as you thought things would be.
Yeah.
Where do you begin?
So, yeah. But the team, I mean, I've had the great privilege in meeting your team and obviously have enjoyed making the investment on behalf of Natera and it's been a great journey. It sounds to me like you've assembled the dream team here. Can you talk a little bit about the team and who's on base?
Yes. Yeah. First, most importantly, Jared Tangney, he's our co-founder, president, and CTO. And one of the reasons why we're here today is because, what he did with his co-founder, Joshua Windmiller, they took an approach that was not maybe I should take this back. They took an approach that required a lot of guts. I mean, to have the courage to do something in a way that's so orthogonal that has never been done before. Who in the right mind would invent an electrochemical biosensor out of a semiconductor chip, right? I mean, how would you go about doing that, right? And to think that you can scale that and have the funding to put chemistry on that, right? When it's hundreds of times smaller than a human hair filament, how do you even put chemistry on that, right? And how do you make them individually addressable and have it survive penetration into the skin just beneath the surface of the skin without it breaking? I mean, so many people, who in the right mind would do it? And they did it. And so Jared, kudos to Jared. He came out of his PhD program at UC San Diego and had no other frame of reference. And that's probably why they were so bold, right? People like us that in industry for 20 plus years, we know what works and we stick to what works, right? Think outside the box. So Jared, kudos to him and our co-founder Joshua for even attempting this. And then we rounded out the team with people that have built sensors before, have commercialized them before, inventors, really people that are 0 to 1 people. So one of the first hires was on the regulatory side, largely because we've got to figure out how to get this through the regulatory agencies. And there's no better way than partnering with the agencies. And so needed to find somebody that was well-versed and would be able to partner with the FDA. So, and it's very hard to recruit people when you don't have much cash on hand and you don't have a working prototype, right? So, and then the technical bench, we dug deep in, and we have the people that really influenced and shaped the CGM industry in terms of being able to manufacture and scale, the people who are really involved in algorithm development for factory calibration and things like this. And what we do is so unique that there's nothing borrowed from industry that we could use in what we do today. And so there was a lot of invention required. So we needed people here that were inventors, structured and unstructured, right? Sometimes we have to solve problems that structure can't bring. So a little bit of luck there on that front too. And so, heavy on the technical side. So
very interesting. What's been sort of the most humbling part of the product development? Or is it the regulatory? Is it just the sheer chemistry of doing it? Like what's
my
the
goodness. Hey Tom, we are 5 companies under one umbrella, right? First is we have to be profoundly seasoned on semiconductor manufacturing processes, right?
Mhm.
To be able to establish processes to etch microsensors a few hundred times smaller than a human hair filament on a silicon wafer, it's profound. That's our core competency. So we have to understand those trade secrets and be able to drive those processes. And so we have to be a software company, right? Because that's how user interface. So data science and software development capabilities in-house and algorithm development. We have to be a material science company because we're using proprietary materials with proprietary chemistries to sense biomarkers like glucose. And we have to be a consumer electronics company, right? Because the form factor, we have, for the first time in my 27 plus years, we had a clean slate, meaning there was no existing legacy hardware that we had to build from. There was no legacy manufacturing infrastructure that we had to build from and leverage. So we decided to make sure that we weren't just providing one biomarker continuously to people that need this, but to actually provide context around the person. So we added activity and sleep on top of glucose, so it can really get a better picture of your metabolic health without having to pair other devices or synchronize data from other devices on the back end, all in one wearable device. And we also decided to put a user interface directly on the wearable because we can wear our biosensors on the forearm, and there hasn't been a wearable on the forearm before, really. And we put it on the forearm so you can actually see real-time feedback that's always on, even if you don't have your phone. And so, the consumer tech stack was really challenging because when you're biosensing and you have a LED display that you're powering using off-the-shelf components in the middle of the pandemic,
Yeah.
there's not enough time or resources to develop a custom chip that's optimized for low power. So we had to balance, how do you have an always-on biowearable with LED light feedback in real time in the power budget to sense and power the LED lights and have some form of connectivity. So that was ridiculously difficult. And so, yeah. And then we have to scale this thing. So we're, five literally separate core competencies all under one umbrella and to have all functions unified in communicating to get to the finish line. That was really quite a hurdle.
Wow. What a journey. What a journey there. Let's kind of break this down into for folks who don't know what a CGM is and what a biosensor is. I know that from personal experience, I've been tinkering around with a CGM lately. So my primary care doctor told me that my fasting blood glucose was kind of on the higher side, right? It's still in the healthy range, but it's a little bit on the higher end of the healthy range. And I think I texted you about this once, freaking out, and you were like, "Don't worry about it." But that being said, it kind of freaked me out, and it started to get me thinking about how, like, what I put in my body and how I live my life. And so I went ahead and got a prescription for a G7. Don't kill me for this, but it's the only thing that's commercially available. Obviously, I'd be all over Biolinq. I'd be all over Biolinq.
It's a great product.
Approved. But yeah, so I got the G7. Now, obviously, I've played around. I've been at the office and we've looked at the Biolinq product and seen how it operates on people in your trials, and it's amazing. And it just feels, for me, it's obvious what the value prop is. Like, I don't like sticking a gigantic needle into my arm. I want to also put it on my forearm or on my leg. I want to put it wherever I want to put it. And I also just, I don't want to have to worry about it. And if it falls off, I put another one on, right? Can you sort of break down it's called the value proposition to the patient, to the consumer, beyond just the accuracy? Because we know the Biolinq's accuracy is awesome, right? It's best in class. So it's headed down that direction, right? So tell us a little bit about what success looks like for the patient.
Sure. It's really, really hard to develop a sensor that can track glucose well. But it's the minimum that needs to be done to have a viable solution that can come into the market. But there are so many things that we can do to improve the user experience. And part of that journey includes understanding what kinds of information would be useful. So there's a lot of data coming from CGM devices, when you have glucose values streamed to your phone every minute or every 5 minutes, it's a lot of data points. And so how do we make data points into useful information? So we have a lot of data, but not so much useful information. So in a single wearable, even if you don't have your phone, by combining activity and sleep, if you look at the pillars for metabolic health, you have to look at sleep and you have to look at activity. You have to look at your diet and exercise. And metabolic health literacy is so low that it's really hard to make better choices and create good habits if you don't know your relationship with foods you like to eat, with the medications you may be taking, with the amount of activity you have or don't have, and the kind of sleep you're getting. Now, I'm not talking about quantifying the quality of your sleep. It's really just looking at your baseline, right? So if you only need to sleep 6 hours a day and that's all you need, great. But if you're suddenly sleeping 12 hours a day, what's going on, right? Are you falling into a depression? Are you not eating as much? Are you sick? What's the deal? And the opposite is true. If you're generally sleep 10 hours a day and suddenly you're sleeping 4 hours a day, what's going on, right? So, and generally we don't look at that level of information, and there's not an easy way to see this. So one of the value propositions is to make sure we provide context around the person passively. And having synchronized data from all your different devices. If you do have multiple devices, great. And if you're doing that, amazing. We encourage everybody to do it. But for those that can't, we offer one single wearable that can do all of it, even if you don't have a phone. And then the power of redundancy and multi-analyte capabilities. This is really the single greatest reason why our team came together, is because what happens after glucose, right? And for glucose, it's very important, whether you have diabetes or not, whether you're on insulin or not, there's a minimum level of reliability that needs to be there for people to trust the information that they're seeing, right? So having a microsensor with multiple standalone electrodes that gives you redundancy, gives you that ability to deal with outliers that you have every once in a while, right? So you're not facing a single point of failure, right? So that redundancy allows us to focus on reliability is the first most important pillar in the design of our first generation product. And then the multiple electrodes on one array, that's only 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters, the die size. It's extremely small. That allows us to put multiple analytes on one single array. So we can combine glucose with lactate, right? And really get a better picture. And lactate sensing is one of those pillars that will help characterize activity, right? More so than what you may have through an accelerometer, right? Especially in documenting strenuous activity. And for people who take insulin, there are a few reasons why a person's insulin can drop, their glucose levels can drop very, very quickly. One is if you have too much insulin, and the other is if you have too much activity, strenuous activity, and you have the risk of severe hypoglycemia. So to be able to characterize that with a lactate sensor, and for people that are fitness enthusiasts, if you are able to leverage a continuous lactate sensor for lactate threshold training, zone 2 training, you can really dramatically help improve your endurance. So there are many, many reasons why you would want multiple analytes on one wearable sensor. And we have the capability to do that. Now, we are not yet FDA cleared or approved, so I wanted to emphasize that. But it is this multi-parameter, multi-analyte capability that is a profound differentiator. And the display that I talked about for the user on body, it gives another opportunity to support cognitive restructuring. And it's extremely important. And what do you mean? What is cognitive restructuring? Well, you need 3 things to support cognitive restructuring and support sustainable behavior change. You have to have real-time feedback passively when teachable moments arise, right? So, and to do that, we put on an LED display with LED lights on the wearable. So when your glucose levels are in its normal target range, it has this blue light that shines on and off. And when your glucose levels rise into the hyperglycemic excursion above 180 milligrams per deciliter, which is the definition of high glucose levels, then it turns yellow. And it stays yellow flashing yellow at you until you come back down into the target range, and then you get to see blue again. Well, if I drink a glass of orange juice and I see that sensor
Mm-hmm.
turn from blue to yellow, then I
Mm-hmm.
automatically link, wow, orange juice caused my glucose levels to spike. And
Sure.
then I see that I'm still yellow, right? An hour after I drink that orange juice. Well, it gives me the opportunity to go do something about it, right? So, and what do I
Yeah.
do about it?
Yes.
I can stand up, I could walk for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I can see if that helps bring my levels back down to target range. So think about this as a
Very cool.
range sensor, right? But that cause and effect is really
Mm-hmm.
what drives the cognitive restructuring. And now I know. In here's the power of knowing. I could decide to finish that glass of orange juice because I love it. And the consequence of that is I have high glucose, but I know how to take care of it, and I can take a walk for 10, 15 minutes. I could decide to stop drinking the orange juice because I'm not going to walk, right? At least I have that choice to know that, wow, I didn't know orange juice spiked me like that. And or I could choose something else next time around. But I have the ability to choose. And so the sensors are not judgmental. It doesn't say you can't eat your donut, but
Yeah.
here's what you can do about it if you want
Yeah.
some moderation, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the power of that always on sensor, that is a huge, huge differentiator in terms of the user experience.
That's amazing. So look, I have this kind of vision in my mind. I'm envisioning a world where, I'm wearing Biolink. I've got my application, so I'm able to track my activity to see what spikes my glucose levels, what doesn't. What about an AI element to all this? So you've got all these analytes that you're able to sense. How many years before we've got, you know, enough sensing power, enough AI power to be able to just tell us what to do, right? Like choose your own adventure. Like, hey, I want to live my day without a single glucose spike, and I want to lower my, H1 HbA1c by 10% or whatever, right? Tell me what I need to do for the next 3 months, right? Like, how far are we before we get to a place like that?
Wow. You know, the we're in the first decade in human history where this is literally in the horizon. So, with especially in the diabetes space, especially for people that use insulin, there are more choices and solutions than ever before where drug delivery with sensing combined with extraordinary algorithms in machine learning and soon to be AI power
Mhm.
on an automatic cycle how much insulin you may need in a loop that doesn't involve much interaction, right? And all the safety has
Mhm.
studied. So we're there now. When it comes to mainstream use of biosensing and metabolic health, generally speaking, well, why don't we see foundation healthcare AI models proliferate
Mhm.
today, right? We see the power of AI in many areas, and in healthcare and medicine specifically, we see the power of AI for imaging, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
to be able to really catch and accurately see, tumors, right? Better than a human eye, better than a radiologist looking at these things. It's proven. But you need high fidelity, high resolution information on the human condition from home in a longitudinal basis, right? In order
Yeah.
to develop the foundation healthcare AI models. So why we don't have the ability, we haven't had the ability to sense things like hormones, right? Antigens, antibodies, all of those things that would be important to extend human health span. Well, it's in the near term horizon. And what I mean by that is in the next decade, you're going to see a lot of breakthroughs in new biomarkers that can be sensed continuously. You're going to see a lot of that data be utilized to develop foundation healthcare AI models. You're going to see longitudinal data be correlated with longevity and other chronic diseases. You're going to see cancer become more of a chronic disease, right? Because there are great therapeutics, earlier screening, better biosensing, all of this is in the horizon. So I truly believe AI will transform, healthcare and healthcare delivery and extend human health span. And one very important pillar that has to come along with that in order for AI to be successful are additional biomarkers that you can measure continuously without bleeding, without pain from home. So It's within reach, Tom.
Awesome.
Within
I
reach.
love it. That's inspirational. I mean, I
Yeah.
look to guys like you and leaders like you to get us there because I will say, like, I like to think of myself as somewhat educated. I'm in the healthcare space, I'm an investor. I get the good fortune of meeting folks like you that educate me on the topic, but I can imagine someone who's just picking up a CGM who's been newly diagnosed with a disease, whether it's type 1, type 2 diabetes. It can be a bit overwhelming, right? It can be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of data to analyze, right? And so sometimes triangulating different data sets and inferencing just based on all of the data out there it can be challenging, right? Like looking at my wearable and comparing it to how my blood glucose spikes.
Yeah, it's a
People
lot of
don't
data.
necessarily get there on their own, right? So it would be nice to bring all that stuff together into a robust form factor.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if you think about, I mean, why is all this important? We all want to live healthier, longer, right? I mean,
Yep.
this is foundationally why this is important. And if you look at the pillars for longevity, the historical pillars for longevity, there were only three: diet, exercise, and screening.
sleep.
And screening.
Oh, screening.
Like
Screening.
diet,
Got
exercise,
it.
and screening.
Okay. Yeah.
That has
Yep.
really been it, right?
That's
Why
it.
aren't you losing weight? Why don't you be more active and exercise? And you need to screen for this and that. You need to go see your doctor, draw blood, screen for this and that, right? It's just that cycle. But you know, how should it be? Where are we headed with all of this, right? So in the next decade ahead, it's going to be about sequencing. I don't know if it's been sequenced yet, but sequencing, I mean, it's still
23andMe. 23andMe. That was the extent of it.
There you
So
go, right?
I don't know where my data is now.
I mean,
I
you
think
wanna
Regeneron
know.
owns it now.
I mean, you want to know what your risk factors are, right?
Sure.
So sequencing is going to be important, and the cost will continue to come down, and it will matter at some point. And then full body scans, right? Because it gets a snapshot of where you are. So if ever you do have a tumor that develops one day, you can actually look back and see, hey, when the baseline was and how fast this grew. And then biosensing and AI, right? These are the new pillars that are going to drive health moving forward in terms of longevity. And it won't be the traditional just diet, exercise, and screening, right? So all of those technologies. And the crazy thing is, what's powering this? Deep tech. And it is deep tech, right? So the hard things required to do this is all deep tech and AI, right? So
Yep. No, it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. I do have a technology question for you, or a capability question for Biolinq. So you mentioned lactate, you've mentioned glucose. I know there's other things you're working on, but your website lists, and since it's on your website, it's fair game. You mentioned ketone sensor, right? And someone that I'm very close with, I won't name names, someone I'm very, very close with has type 1 diabetes. And he recently had, I think it's called ketosis, meaning his insulin pump wasn't working. His blood glucose spiked to 600. He almost died. And they couldn't give him insulin right away without checking his ketones. And they couldn't do it on the spot. So they were like, they had to transport him to the hospital, get the test ordered, get the results, and then give him water or insulin, which I thought my head exploded when I sort of connected the dots that he had this immediate ketone analyzing need, and then you have the ketone sensor. Tell us about that. Is that like on the horizon, or is that confidential? You can't talk about it. That's fine too, but thought I'd ask you.
Sure. And ketones are important. So there's a reason why the market hasn't seen many new biosensors commercialized, right? Glucose is maybe the best characterized, and the one that has made tremendous impact in the last several decades. So glucose sensors use an enzyme called glucose oxidase, and enzyme-based electrochemistry has been the most accurate form of biosensing to date. So, and when you think about other biomarkers like lactate, continuous lactate, well, it uses another enzyme to measure lactate. There are only a handful of enzymes found in nature to measure biosensors. And so ketones is an enzyme-based electrochemistry. So it is possible to measure ketones, and many companies are working on it. It is within reach. It is something that is in our pipeline. and it is important to us. For a young company like Biolinq, well, I shouldn't say we're that young, but for a company that's transitioning from an R&D kind of organization to a commercial ready organization, the funding needs to be there to fund the many analytes that we envision are capable and available on our platform. So ketones is one of them. And so what about all of the other biomarkers where there are no enzymes?
Yeah.
So, this is where we are leveraging DNA aptamer technology, or single short strands of DNA that are evolved to bind to new biomarkers that have no other means of measuring or sensing in vivo, because there are no enzyme. There's no enzyme equivalent for hormones like cortisol or estrogen or testosterone. So you have to use something different. And so there's a new class of technologies leveraging single strands of DNA called DNA aptamers that could be put on biosensors to potentially measure new biomarkers. So that's on the horizon as well. So we have, and these are all still electrochemistry-based technologies. And the difference is in the resolution of the biomarkers that you're intending to measure. So if you're going to measure a hormone like cortisol, well, free cortisol is about 1,000 times less concentrated than the glucose molecule.
Ooh,
how in the
interesting.
world do you measure at that small of a concentration in vivo, right? But yeah, so there are very few platforms that can do this, and so we are on the leading edge of some of the R&D research to make that leap. So and it's just a matter of funding. So it's a long-winded way of saying ketones are important in our list, and it's really going to be a matter of prioritizing our funding to target the biomarkers that we believe will make the biggest impact as soon as possible.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you going through that, Rich. Thank you. And funding is a foundational element, but it does sound like Biolinq, it's a platform company, right? You're starting with glucose because that's the kind of the near term, product market fit opportunity, but there's so much potential here and becoming a ubiquitous kind of sensor, as you mentioned earlier. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Love to.
My answers are. This may be a 3-hour session.
No.
Question number 2.
Question number 3. No, we're on to a different topic. So I thank you for walking us through your journey. We covered a lot of topics. Journey, a little bit about the company. I'm so excited about the company, so I want to spend a lot of time on that. But I'm going to jump to kind of leadership, right? Your leadership and culture. One of my mentors, Adam Street Partners, told me that, it's just culture can eat strategy for breakfast, right? And so it's so important to build a rock star culture. And that ranges from like performance expectations to how people treat each other and all of that. Kind of wanted to ask you the question as a leader in the space. What do you look for when you're hiring someone to join your company, right? What sort of characteristics do you look for? What are the non-negotiables for your team?
Yeah, thanks. This is a tough one because it's really heavily dependent on what phase the company's in. So in an early stage company, pre-revenue, pre-commercial, in a new category, you need people that are 0 to 1 people, right? People that can work well in a highly ambiguous environment, right? People that are self-driven and people that are seasoned veterans with some form of structure behind their decision-making process. So we're not guessing, but making intentional choices. And when we fail, we characterize them so it leads to the next leapfrog invention, right? And so there's not much room to bring people on board that don't have experience. And when you're building a technology where there's no prior predicate, that's even harder to come by. So what we have been very fortunate to have in our team here, kudos to the team, we lean very heavily on people that are highly motivated and committed, wicked smart. We take wicked smart any day, right? And hungry. And what we mean by hungry is whether people are hungry for success, hungry to prove that they can do the impossible, self-motivated and driven. The combination between wicked smart and hungry is almost unbeatable, right?
I love it.
To give you an example, we hired a young, very extraordinary, very hungry, very wicked smart person, one of the smartest people I've ever come across in my professional career, with no industry experience whatsoever. And this person would otherwise not have an opportunity in a company like us, because we don't have time to teach and train from the ground up when we're trying to invent, right? And they're but this person was so wicked smart and so hungry that we couldn't say no. And I will tell you, this person was one of the single greatest individual contributors, working across many areas within the company, from sensor, literally he would come in and build sensors by hand because he had curiosity in how these things were made, to coding, manufacturing, software to help streamline some processes, to algorithms, and to across the board, everything. Probably one of very few people that could be a jack of all trades and master of all. So it's an example of, even without experience, but if you're wicked smart, committed, and hungry, there's a spot for you, right? And you can make a massive impact.
That's awesome. I mean, it's very, this is, my boss, Dirk Schappler, he's our kind of CEO here at Terra Ventures. And so we oftentimes kind of reflect on how do we want to, what sort of culture do we want to create here at Terra Ventures? And it's very in line with kind of how you see the world. We want people that are wicked smart, hungry, but also we really foster collaboration. It's a little different within the venture world because we're all kind of going after, there's not really a lot of functional groups. Like, we're all trying to accomplish one goal, which is to back great companies like Biolinq, right? That's our job. And we're trying to create both strategic and financial returns. And so we're really trying to take these three different groups that we have. They are quasi-functional groups, and operate as one team. So in addition to the wicked smart and hungry, we're looking for collaboration between those two teams. Yeah. And that can be hard. That can be hard sometimes, but we're working on it.
Let me share one really unusual thing that we did early on in creating the initial team that got us to, or creating the team that got us to commercial viability. So humility is very, very
very underrated, but very much necessary.
Right. Yeah. And largely because if you're going to collaborate, having humility is a very important pillar there. And maybe I'll take this a step further, because it's hard to raise capital pre-revenue in this macroeconomic environment. So when you're trying to recruit the best talent in this space, these are people that are chief technology officers of companies that have been very successful. These are people that are presidents of publicly traded companies that have done very well. And, in having them come into our environment as leaders with C-suite titles, we had one ask for everybody when we started building out our leadership team, which was, we don't care how successful you may have been with how great of titles you have had. All of that is great in building your foundational character and experience, but we're not carrying any of those titles here. So everybody came in at the VP level. There was no senior VP. There was no C-suite this and C-suite that. We had presidents come join us, publicly traded companies, presidents join us as vice presidents. And it was very interesting because in the interview processes, we had so many really talented people with very senior titles, and even ones without senior titles that absolutely were so focused on a title that it was such a big distraction that we ended up walking away from these people because they focused more on their title than the mission we had in front of us. And for those people that threw the titles away, put them aside, we didn't have anybody coming here entitled because they were the president of a publicly traded company, right? And so my voice is louder than yours. That was something that was really hard to balance early on. But it made a difference because we could have made some really big mistakes. And some people that were so focused on a title of all of the great things we're doing to transform healthcare, the title is the least important things of the things that we're thinking about, right? From a day-to-day operational experience basis. So that
very cool.
One is a side note.
That's an interesting dynamic. Kind of touching on my next question here. What's as you reflect on your last couple of years as CEO and taking this on as an operator, what's a mistake you made that you sort of reflect back on that you learned the most from? Might be helpful to share for other entrepreneurs out there as a shout out to them to say, hey, here's how I handle the situation, and here's what I recommend you do as an operator.
Yeah, I think as you build a great culture, people are afraid to let you down, right? And so there's a really big fear of failure, because if you fail and we run out of cash, we die, right? We can't raise additional capital, and the technology goes down the drain, and it's a real fear. So how do we have a dialogue around failure and the fear of failure? Because nobody wants to let anybody down, right? Team members, bosses, and things like this. And we have a really humble co-founder, president, CTO here, Jared Tangney, and I learned.
Great guy. What a great guy.
Yeah,
Incredible. Salt of the
talk
earth.
about pillar of humility. I mean, he is the ideal role model.
If I were as smart as he was, I shouldn't say this publicly, but wow, he could be the most arrogant person on the planet, but he is not. And he would get away with it too, but he does. He's such a great guy. Yeah.
And so how do you empower people to embrace failure and that it's okay, right? What's not okay is making the same mistake over and over again, right? And not learning from it, but that it's okay. And I'll give you an example. We had a very important readout on something we were doing in our tech stack with our algorithm teams, and they couldn't make it work. And they were really scared to show us that, it didn't work. There's no other way around it, right? It didn't work. And largely because A, they were afraid their jobs would be on the line, right? If they couldn't figure out how to make it work. And B, like, where do we go from here, right? How do we fix this? We don't know. And so we didn't fire anybody. We didn't scream at anybody. And we thanked them, and Jared thanked them for their hard work, and go have at it, go figure it out, right? No joke. And sure enough, in due time, they turned around and addressed everything and had the freedom to fail. And had the humility and leadership to allow that without, let's just say, the overhang of humiliation, embarrassment, or having a chip on the shoulder that I failed and I can't make this work. And you empower people to work all that much harder to make it right. And so, and there's a really fine balance there. Once people start getting too afraid to tell the truth that this is not working, and you can imagine the stacking of these errors ultimately could be fatal for a technology or a company, especially early on. So embracing failure is probably one thing that is pivotal. I am a perfectionist. And when you hire people to do the things that you're good at doing, and you micromanage them and push them towards perfection, that clearly is a big mistake in how not to manage and run a team. And I've made those mistakes and have learned from them. So a lot of examples of empowering people to have these perform, but in an environment that embraces failure, because I don't know any technology or any entrepreneur that succeeded without failing before, right? It's a part of winning.
I don't remember who wrote the book, but this is kind of dating me to my internship. I was an intern at a venture capital firm out of Chicago called Sandbox Industries. Is the Blue Cross Blue Shield Venture Fund. This is going back almost 14 years, right? But I was a summer intern, and I remember they had us read the Fail Fast, Fail Often book, right? And this is a little bit of a sidebar question for you and a derivative off your comment here, but I read the book and I was like, well, I get fail fast, but I'm not sure about fail often, right? Tell me a little bit about that, right? Because Japan has a fear of failure. So one of the challenges we have at Terra Ventures is, we are expected to, find quality companies. Inherently, by virtue of the work we do, there will be failures. These are risky endeavors, they're risky ventures, particularly on the venture studio side of our equation, which we no longer do. Yeah. But that there is a fail often mantra there, and I think Japan has a fear of that. How do you sort of tell us about your mindset on that? Do you agree with fail fast, fail often, or what's the idea there?
Yeah, it depends on what stage of the technology you're at in its maturity curve. Early on, you have to fail fast, but you also have to fail often, right?
Yeah, fair.
It's equally important to characterize your outliers that don't work, right? Because that goes into any specifications that you need, so you know what the edge cases look like, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what the edge cases look like, then you're going into a a product where you have blinders on, and edge cases will pop up in the real world, right? And you need to be safe. So the more mature you are, then it's still feasible to fail fast, but the more frequent you fail, there's time and overhead and burden that really starts to compound, right? So it just depends on the phase you're in. And so, and the definition of failure, what is it? And so, some failures are actually not failures because they lead to new invention.
Yes.
When you're trying to fix something that didn't work, it forces you to think outside the box, and then you have a solution that came about that was orthogonal to what you're intending to do. Some of the things that we were blessed with were, a lack of a better word, random luck, because we failed and we had to take a shot on goal, and wow, we didn't think that this led to that, right? So invention comes through failures at times, right? So as long as it's time-bound and managed. And, otherwise you make no progress, right? Otherwise you're just otherwise it's more of a permanent academic research.
It's like, hey, let's shake it off, right? Like we didn't get to the outcome we expected, but what did we learn from it, and where do we go from here, right? And so I like that. I like that.
Like fail, more mature, fail and refine, right?
Fail and refine. I like that.
But early on is kind of fail and reinvent.
Yes. I like that. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Awesome. Well, this is great. I kind of wanted to pivot to kind of our last section of the podcast here. Wanted to get your take on what's happening in the markets today, right? Macroeconomics, any trends, anything happening that kind of inspires you, right? So, I mean, we talked a little bit about where biosensors fit in the future of healthcare, right? But what are kind of like your predictions, right, for the next 5 to 10 years? What's going to happen here within the broader healthcare landscape? And then, I guess, give us a little bit of context for where Biolinq fits into that.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start by saying, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the macroeconomic. And it's hard to plan in the face of uncertainty, right? So, I think that overhang is going to be here for some time. So we are a little bit blessed because we're not yet commercial. When you have the responsibility to serve millions of people with product that they cannot afford to live without, it's a very big burden to plan in the face of uncertainty. So, we are planning commercial, readiness activities while we navigate through our first regulatory submission with the FDA. And so, to the extent that we come out on the other side, we don't have as much uncertainty to deal with not having a very large installed base that has to have product full time. So we are leaning heavily on our investors, our supply chain partners, to reduce as much uncertainty as possible, right? Whether it pertains to how we scale, components, where we source from, and things like this, right? So we don't have a big legacy infrastructure that's rigid. So nimbleness for us now allows us to prepare to adapt and pivot so that we can support customers when it comes time to start getting product out the door. I do see a very big opportunity to keep people out of the hospital with biosensing. We have an aging population around the world. That's not slowing down. We don't have health coming in. So we have to figure out how to get more people to understand their metabolic health and risk factors, and more people screened from home, and more people that can be managed from the home environment. It is the only way to reduce costs in a rapidly aging population around the world. So I think there is a very big opportunity for hard tech, deep tech, and med tech, and especially so for biosensing. And we're seeing the power of what companies in the consumer electronics space have done with smartwatches and all of the great things they're bringing to market on the consumer health side of things. And they're really now very large players in healthcare, directly or indirectly, right? And so how do we tap into everything that's out there that people have from home, leverage the AI models that are becoming more profound every month in lowering the cost of care, right? So I think there's a very promising future ahead despite the uncertainty. The IPO windows are horrible right now. The public markets
bad,
volatile. But I think that it forces innovation. And I'll leave you with this, Tom. if we weren't faced with an existential threat of dying every single one, with being out of our hand, I don't think we would have been forced to invent the way we have, right?
Yep.
We had a finite amount of cash, a very big mountain to climb, and a very big deliverable, many deliverables over and over again. And what kept us in the game is the existential threat that we would die unless we solve this.
Yeah.
And so sometimes these things turn into real opportunities, right? If we had unlimited piles of cash, we'd probably be spending another 20 years like dancing around certain things, trying to perfect this or that, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So there is opportunity, in the midst of uncertainty.
Amazing. Amazing. Rich, this was an awesome discussion. I really, really appreciate your time. I know we're running low on time here, but before you go, for all the founders listening who are just kind of tuning in, what's kind of one thing that you wish someone told you when you started this journey? I think a lot of founders out there might appreciate getting your insights on that.
Yeah, actually, two things really quickly. Don't be so focused on dilution, right? Which means bring in
dilution. Investors.
Yes, bring in as much working capital as possible whenever possible. And so you have runway, and do everything faster than you can possibly plan for. Speed of execution trumps everything, right? And move faster.
Bezos always says if you feel like you're ready, you've missed the boat. You're too late, right? So you gotta be moving fast.
Yeah, if you don't come into work every day scared out of your mind, you're not doing something important enough.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Well, amazing time, Rich. Where can people find your work? Any kind of contact info that you want to shout out to the listeners?
Follow us, Biolinq on LinkedIn. We've been in stealth mode. I don't post very much for obvious reasons, but as we come out of stealth mode, we will be getting our message out. So follow us on LinkedIn and Biolinq, and then we'll spread out to social media when the time is right. But heads down right now, getting through the regulatory process, preparing for commercial readiness and our pipeline. Lots to do. So follow us, and certainly thank you for your time. Very humble to be here with you. Thank you for your support. We wouldn't be here without you. So thanks for your inspiration.
Thanks for giving us your time today. And that's Biolinq, Biolinq, Biolinq.com. So great having you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate your time. Take care. Have a great one.
See you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Health Tech Invest podcast, powered by Natera Ventures, your go-to source for healthcare and tech venture investing. For additional information, resources, and ways to connect with us, please visit nateraventures.com. Together, let's spark innovation for the future of tech and healthcare investing.